Good morning. Once again, welcome to Sunrise. This is the program where we go through the Bible one chapter a day. And we just finished reading the book of Ezekiel. Today, we start the book of Daniel. Daniel was a contemporary of Jeremiah, of Ezekiel, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. He was among the very first group that went to captivity in 605 BC. Ezekiel was to follow later on, a number of years later on, about 10 years later. When he went to captivity, what we learn in the Bible is that he is recruited together with his colleagues, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to go through the training of the Babylonians. This was a strategy employed by the Babylonians to brainwash young men whom they were abducting from all over the nations that they were putting under submission and leading to captivity, to later on be deployed to their own nations to do the bidding for the Babylonians. But this book, much as it is about the Babylonians and the Medo-Persians later on, you also realize that it's a book about the God of history. The thread you see through the book, whether it is the Babylonians in power or the Medo-Persians in power, is that God is controlling the history of man. When Daniel lands in Babylon, for example, and he is put in training together with his colleagues, they refuse to eat the food that they considered defiling food. And they get favor from their trainer to abstain from eating some of the food and drinking the wine of the Babylonians. And even if they were not eating this choice food, after 10 days, they actually looked better than those who are eating this food, meaning that it is God who gave them the good health, not the food that they were supposed to eat. The other thing that you realize that happened was that God gave them a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight as far as the Babylonian education is concerned, and so they graduate at the top of the class. And in chapter 2, when Nebuchadnezzar has this very weird dream, which he cannot even remember what it was about, and he is greatly disturbed, actually, it was only Daniel who could remind the king the kind of a dream he had, and also interpret for the king the meaning of this dream. And the meaning of the dream had to do with the rising and falling of kingdoms, starting with the Babylonian kingdom, followed by the Medo-Persian kingdom, followed by the Greece kingdom, and later on we have King Antioch, who really was considered one of the worst kings the Jews served under. And you could have thought that King Nebuchadnezzar, having heard about the interpretation of this dream, that he would have been very careful to not go against the God of Daniel. But that was not the case, because later on you see him building an idol before whom everybody had to bow down. And this is where you find these three young Jewish men getting into trouble with Nebuchadnezzar, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They refuse to bow down, and of course they are thrown into the furnace of the fiery furnace, and they do not burn. There is a fourth man. There are three, but they are with a fourth man inside the fire. This fourth man, actually, in this book, is something else that keeps being repeated. God comes to the salvation of these three men as the fourth man in the fire. Something that actually should also have told King Nebuchadnezzar that he was not dealing with ordinary people, and perhaps it was time for him to change, to be transformed and follow the God of Israel. But again, it doesn't happen because, remember, it is God playing in the background determining the history of humanity, not only during that time, but a history that is still being unveiled before us even today. And so in chapter 4, you find Nebuchadnezzar exalting himself and again being humbled to the extent that he is drawn away from his throne and driven away to live like a wild animal until he really submits before the King of Kings and the God of gods. We are not told much about King Nebuchadnezzar after his return to the throne in chapter 4, but what we do know is that upon his death, none of his sons was found worthy to replace him. And so the person who replaced him, King Belshazzar, he reigns for some time in Babylon. But at one point he has this big party where he invites his friends, his colleagues, his age mates, his family, and anybody who bothered to go for this party. And when he is high in spirits and drunkenness, he asks for the cups that King Nebuchadnezzar had picked from the Jerusalem temple. And as they are drinking their wine from these golden cups that King Nebuchadnezzar had brought, that famous finger of God appears, and it writes before him on the wall, mene, mene, tekel. It is clear that at this time, Daniel had left the palace because King Belshazzar is very worried, is very troubled, but the Queen Mother advises him to call Daniel, whom he had removed from the palace, so that Daniel could interpret whatever this finger had written. And when Daniel comes, he actually interprets for him and tells him that your deeds have been weighed, they have been found wanting, and the kingdom has been taken and given to the Medo-Persians. And that same night, we learn that the Medo-Persians came and took over the kingdom of the Babylonians, and they defeated the Babylons. So the first of the first transition that King Nebuchadnezzar had seen in chapter 2, and which Daniel had helped to interpret, actually comes to pass in chapter 5. Now, chapter 6, which is actually the last chapter in this book, where Daniel is still in the palace, he is now in the palace of the Medo-Persian kings, King Cyrus, called in this chapter King Darius. And all what Daniel gives us here is a glimpse of the happenings in the inner circles of the Medo-Persian kingdom. It was not so much different from the Babylonians, although the Medo-Persians were a little bit more favorably disposed towards the Jews, because remember, this is the kingdom that allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. However, at this particular time, some of the administrators that Daniel served with are jealous about him, and they incite the king, and Daniel ends up in the lion's den. And again, he is not alone in the lion's den. He is with the second person. He's here. There's a second man in the den, who is the fourth person in chapter 3, when his three colleagues are in the fire. So, what are some of the things that we can learn from these first 6 chapters of Daniel? One is that it's actually better to be in the midst of fire, or even in the lion's den, when you have the second man with you, or when you have God with you, than to be outside where there is seemingly peace when you are alone. 2 is the fact that it is actually possible to practice faith in a very harsh social environment. Daniel and his colleagues were actually able to practice their faith in the courtyard of the Babylonians, in the courtyard of the Persians, even though these were people who were quite opposed to their faith. 3 is the fact that God is a God of history. He took the kingdom from the Jews, that's how the book opens, to the Babylonians, and now he has taken it over from the Babylonians had handed it over to the Medo-Persians. And the story is going to continue unfolding, and actually some of the visions that Daniel now is going to enter into, the story is still unfolding even today. So thank you very much for walking with us through this journey of our walk through the Bible, and may you enjoy these first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel. Next week, we are going to look at chapter 7 through to the end of the book, chapter 12. Thank you very much. God bless you.